We next go to MP Oliphant. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was on. I don't like the microphones in this room. They're harder for me to understand. I'm old-fashioned. Thank you to the witnesses for bringing your opinions, your ideas to us, and for your activism on behalf of Cuban people. Just want to reiterate about Canada's engagement recently, obviously, this week with the announcement of $8 million in humanitarian aid, which I am very happy with and proud of. And it would seem to me we have 3 things in this conversation. One is the desire of Canadians to help the Cuban people. And so we start with essentials like food. And then we would go there in those basic issues like healthcare, education, housing, which also require fuel. Those are the things that Canadians have spoken to me the most about, and our government's response has been first in that way. The second issue that Canadians raise a lot are human rights issues, democratic institutions, reform of institutions, participation, equality, and equality, and those issues which they want Canada to foster and want us to invest in Cuba and elsewhere around the world. As a second kind of tier of engagement, the system of government is not Canada's priority. And we recognize that there are systems of government around the world that we are very different from Canadian government. And so we do not engage in either indirect or direct regime change. That is for the Cuban people who live in Cuba to decide. That is not for us to do, nor do I believe that it is for expats living around the world to do. We have a certain safety and security living in Canada. So we do not believe in regime change. It's the indirect regime change that we're also concerned about. So we received a letter, and I checked with the clerk to make sure that I could acknowledge a letter which I've received, we as a committee have received today, from the Americas Policy Group and Common Frontiers, which are actually very clear that they are wanting Canada to stand up against the American, not only the tradition of an embargo, but the more recent coercive activity of starving the country of fuel. And so this is their goal. And so the question I would have for the witnesses is, do they believe that the coercive activities of some countries, including the United States with its embargo, have actually helped change the regime, which has been their stated goal? Because I've heard at least one witness sort of argue for more stringent activities such as that. Have they been effective, and will they be effective in any sense?
Well, thank you for the question. First of all, we would never come to Canada's government or commission to ask direct help for a regime change in Cuba. We are cognizant that the transition to a democratic island is the responsibility of us Cuban. And I would like to correct, if I may, is the responsibility of Cuban not only in Cuba. We have been on exile. There are over 3 million of us who have been forced out of the island, and there is a big number of us who are prohibited right now from debarking a plane in Cuba should we wish to buy a ticket and go to Cuba. So wherever we are is our responsibility. And we are working in creating alliances. We are working in holding bilateral engagement and multinational engagement with many, many governments, like Ms. Barrero was saying. We will be free. It's not a matter of reaching to other governments. What we would like Canada is to stop repping the regime, because the highlights that I made is that it's hard for us Cubans to liberate ourselves when we are against a tyrannical regime. We are against mainstream media who keeps portraying what's not going on the island, and we have democratic nations sending billions and billions of dollars decades after decades, so it's hard to liberate oneself like that. Like I was saying, July 11th, in over 49 cities in Cuba, hundreds of thousands of Cubans took to the street to pacifically demand. Some of them were demanding basic essentials, but some of them were demanding freedom and democracy, which is what we need. And how the regime responded to that, it deploys the armed forces. It shot Duvis Laurencio. and he lost his life. So we have a criminal regime that deploys the armed forces against the civilian population. So yes, we also beg the democracies to at least don't fund them. At least start by not funding them. Start by applying sanctions, why not?
So I think if we're agreed that it should be organic, peaceful change happening in Cuba, what fosters that? Because I don't believe embargoes or starving the people of Cuba of either food or fuel works. So what are your suggestions for positive things that can be done to help the Cuban people so that as they come out of this, and I would call it a crisis despite what we've heard today, because Cuban friends who live in Cuba have told me it's a crisis. We were told it wasn't a crisis.
It is dark
I
crisis.
think so. What can we do that can get us through the crisis to the point where the Cuban people can have self-determination for an improved future?
Very quick response,
Yes.
and then we'll turn to also Ms. Ferrer, and then we'll conclude.
Every time we get to speak about democracy, my face lights up. Well, first of all, I would like to highlight that the hunger in Cuba is not caused by the embargo. The regime decides to stock hotels with all sorts of nutrition, and the bodegas in Cuba are empty shelves. So I would not accept that the room walks out of here thinking that the hunger in Cuba and the extreme poverty is due to the embargo. It's not true. If they are able to secure a supply chain to stock the hotels, they can secure a supply chain to stock the bodega, but they're not interested. And then the second portion to your question, how could Canada assist us in a peaceful democratic transition? For example, Canada could vocally and overtly advocate for the release of the political prisoners. These are innocent people. These are mother, fathers, brothers who took to the street. If we see that the political prisoners that are innocent get released, it will give us an indication that the regime is open to other considerations. So we don't feel comfortable with the idea that we funnel assistance decade after decade and nothing changes on the island.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we go.